Ladies, gentlemen, and young ladies, it's very, very hot in France. The French are in an unprecedented panic, despite the fact that the situation is already becoming very confused on the side of the French regime. Emmanuel Macron has all the worries of world. But to this is added this great concern that Russia has just given to the French leaders and people French in general. The Russian Federation, through the ministry, through a press release from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, comes to designate France as an enemy priority in Europe. First, I was going to say on the list, it's a first to see that Russia officially designates an enemy who is going to be attacked directly. Well, we're not going to say it's a first. As such, since it detected 3 months, it was Germany that was designated. But the way in which Germany had been designated and this time for France, there is a total difference. This time, the designation of the France follows a process institutional, a statement solemn, conducted by or made by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then the real reasons were cleared. Why France is now a priority enemy. Tensions are rising and Russia is no longer ready to tolerate any member state of the European Union or NATO, which puts in a logic of continuing to exercise hostilities against Russia. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the context of this geopolitical conference dedicated to international news, is this world news that we are going to talk. So, except before continuing to share the conference around you, share it in all groups possible. Above all, put a lot of likes and you should always leave your different opinions in the comments. It's very, very hot in France. And one of the aspects that holds my attention in the statements, in the reasons mentioned by France, by Russia, I was going to say, it's the African side that Russia has also been affected. And I tell you, an official statement, let's go in the depths. And so the official announcement came from Kremlin. The statement was made on October 13, 2025. And this statement comes from a press release from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this statement was confirmed then by the spokesman of the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov. We have two sources institutional. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which made a statement. Then the spokesperson of the Russian presidency is the presidency Russian called the Kremlin, comes confirmed through one's own statement. It means it's cooked for France. Moscow now qualifies France priority enemy. Even though Russia has many enemies in Europe, France is now its priority enemy, deposed in grace on Russia's blacklist in all first position. France has just broken the record from Germany and Poland, who sought to be at the head of Russia's enemies. So France won this victory. Unfortunately, it is not a victory smiling who will make you smile, but at opposite that will make you cry sincerely, obviously France. And so it must be said that Russia explains that this decision follows a series of hostile acts charged to Paris. In other words, these are acts, hostile, acts of war that France had to ask and that the Russia noted every time France, if Russia takes such an action, it will take note. Russia takes note. And finally, so much that it is too much, Russia can no longer support. Russia can only declare officially, publicly, before God, before men, and before the story, that France is now his priority enemy. So among these acts, there is delivery of weapons in Kiev. First act that France is criticized for, arms deliveries to Kiev. You know that France has supplied many weapons to Kiev. We saw Emmanuel Macron get up as a rebel leader, as a war chief, for seek to mobilize all of Europe against Russia. It is even the initiator of this famous coalition. Volunteers, you know that very well good. So, coalition of the willing, even before the advent of the coalition of volunteers, they had already started to send weapons, and everything that goes with it follows in Ukraine. This is also the reason why French people got angry. If today at the level of the French parliament it is not going well, no, many felt that Macron did not just squandering their money on the side of Ukraine. This is the first element, the first act of war that Russia notes in the Paris account. The second act of hostility, it is the presence of French military advisors in Ukraine. Why these advisors? Military are there. The fact that these advisors are there, they act in synergy of action with Ukrainian soldiers. That's all makes the logic. So Moscow cannot design this. If France accepts to send military advice, therefore France is an enemy of Russia since Ukraine is an enemy to the Russia. So the third act that Russia blames severely to France, which makes that the France is now on the list or considered or designated as an enemy, number one, is the interception of the Russian oil tanker Borakai. There is something of this 11 days. If I'm not mistaken, this oil tanker Russian had been seized by France, and then France estimated board this tanker since the France wanted to comply with the sanction decisions and so on. But just a few hours later, the France had been forced to release this petrol. So that's an act that did not please Russia at all. Russia considers this to be an act of war. So that was, I think, the third act, the fourth act of hostility that France has posed. It is diplomatic pressure on Africa. For Russia, France does not have the right to exert pressure diplomatic on Africa. Why to exert such diplomatic pressure on Africa? Why seek to influence Africa? And therefore France no longer hides his participation direct to the conflict in Ukraine in these. Consequently, it becomes our enemy priority in the European theater. This is what the authorities said Russians. And so, among these first acts that have been cited, it must be said that the root causes of this designation, to give more details, there is the rise of support French military in Kiev, scalping missiles, drones tactics, training of gunners Ukrainians, the rupture of diplomatic cannon. The Russians believe that Russians announce, I was going to say that France has suspended its security exchanges with the Russia. France froze, ambassadorial visits. France has carried out expulsions of diplomats Russian last September, and so it makes very bad for Russia. And finally, the France's role in Africa. Moscow believes that Paris is waging a war influence against Russia in the Sahel and in Madagascar. And so all of this comes together into account, not forgetting the speech that Macron gave held on October 11th at the UN, where Macron asked to neutralize Russian expansion on all continents. So Moscow perceives this as a statement of open hostility. So here is, young ladies and gentlemen, what Russia said. But meanwhile, Russia is in the process of already prepare for the affront against France. But what are the acts that the Russia is posing? We will talk about this in one of the upcoming video conferences. Thank you so much to all. I'll come back to you with new news. It was the voice from your humble servant, the Samouraï.